Today we'll be talking about Amazon S3, and it's basically simple storage service. The other diagram I was showing you, I was actually trying to tell you that now there's now S3 vectors, right? So meaning it's going to really help a lot of people who are already doing machine learning or anything around that area to use S3 instead of thinking about using a database. Okay, so what is our lesson objective today? We basically need to understand. We want to understand buckets. What are buckets for? And objects, security, and also how we choose optimal storage, right? So storage classes is a thing in AWS S3, and then how we can also look at lifecycle policies and how you manage your data, and then advanced S3 features and optimization as time goes on, okay? But as we usually do from the beginning, we'll talk about the basic things first, okay? So what is S3 basically? S3 is a simple storage service, basically for objects, right? Object will be your images, your PDF, your anything basically. In as much as it doesn't fit into the realm of database, or it doesn't fit into the realm of like a file storage, right? You basically control it inside S3. And from my experience with X3, some people just limit X3 to what they feel it can do, but S3 can do more, right? You can use it to coordinate, like you can coordinate results even amongst the things you are doing. There's just so much you can do with S3. Because why? It gives you that flexibility. It doesn't. It's like a storage, an object storage. You choose whatever you want to store, whether it's JSON, CSV, PDF, name it, videos, MP3s, whatever. All right, and it's highly durable, very very durable service. Unlimited storage capacity, basically. So you can store as so when you talk about size of petabyte scale, gigabyte scale, S3 has you covered. It's also pay per use, right? So pay basically. So what you store, if you store 1 GB, you pay for 1 GB. If you're not storing anything, you're not going to pay anything, right? So it's basically um, how much storage you're using. That's how you're paying. Also, the beauty about it is that if you remember for like volumes, right, you needed to attach the volume to the machine, right? But for S3, it's really API access. You just use API to communicate with your buckets and get files or do whatever you want to do. So that's the switch that comes in. Usually for like EFS, we saw EFS at some point. You have to mount it. EBS, you have to attach it. Mount it to like a compute. But in S3, it's basically you access it using APIs, right? So many use cases. I mentioned one at the beginning. AI is really, yeah, AI is a thing now. So AI is definitely going to be using S3 because of the vector that was just introduced 2 days ago. So, and a lot of people also use it for backup and archival. So if you have like something you want to keep long term, like 5 years, 10 years, S3 it's like a very good choice. And you will see as we go that there are so many storage classes in S3 that makes it cheap, right? You won't be scared that, oh, I'm storing this thing, it's going to cost me money. There are storage tiers that you can actually utilize to keep data that should stay for long. Some people have retention, like there's like you've promised your client and said, oh, you have to keep my data for at least 5 years and nothing will go wrong with it, right? So, and then static website. Actually, a lot of the websites you see online today, most of them actually run on an S3 bucket. Okay, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We'll see how S3 can even do static hosting for you. Although people put on top of S3 other things like the CDN, right? CloudFront. And then big data. So I talked about AI at the beginning, but big data is also something that uses AI, because when you think about whether for analytics or for machine learning training, you need a place where your data will stay, right? Where you can train from, like basically keep data somewhere and then do training from it or do inference from it. That's like a good, very, very perfect use case for S3. So data lakes, right? Big data. And then content distribution, if you put like like a CloudFront CDN on top of S3, that's like you're doing content distribution on the edge. Okay, and there's also hybrid cloud, in the sense that some people, they want to like have a mix of both world, right? They want to like stay on their own premise, but they need the storage from the cloud. S3 has support for you to also do that. And then disaster recovery, right? We'll see how as part of the class, where you can replicate your data from one region to another region, right? Just to make sure that you are fine if there was like a disaster. If there was a disaster, you still can recover your data, right? Because I think we've talked about replication before now. It's just the fact that you can move data from one place to another place as a backup, right? In case if something goes wrong. Okay, so many use cases that are out there. And sometimes also it just depends on you. Like I said, these use cases are there for you to see, but you can always come up with your own use case, in as much as S3 is a good use fit for you. So one of the things also you need to know about is just basically like the naming convention around it. Bucket names must be globally unique across all AWS, right? So what it means is that although it's a like you so what it means is that your buckets, right, is unique throughout AWS. So when you as you see, one key thing of creating a bucket, you have to give it a name, and that name has to be unique, whether across your account or across everybody's account. So if I create a bucket name now, you can't reuse that same bucket again. Okay. um There's obviously exists. You create them per region, right? You create them per region, but the name itself is it has to be global across AWS. No limits, basically. Like we said, it scales almost infinitely. So there's no limit on objects that you can have in the bucket. You can keep as much objects you have. For the bucket name, because usually some people use it as even a website, there's just like a character limit, 3 to 63. It has to be lowercase letters, numbers, and no underscore. When we're creating the bucket, you also see that if you violate any of these requirements, it won't allow you to create a bucket. But if you go with the basic, just using name, numbers, lowercase, no underscore, you should be good, right? Um, and then no IP address. Obviously, you can't call your bucket name an IP address because you can also use bucket names as something that can be in the URL. So I did paste the link there if you wanted to see more of the other rules there. But for the most part, it should be easy for us to create like a very simple bucket, right? So there's really one major concept about buckets. It's just bucket name and keys in the bucket. So what it means is that everything you see outside the bucket name is a key, right? Sometimes the key is a path. It's like slash reports slash 2015 slash January slash summary. No matter how nested it is, all those characters, they are basically key. It's just a key. It's a single key. Okay. So there is only two concepts in S3: bucket and the key, right? The bucket name itself is the bucket name, and then the key is really whatever is out, like whatever the path where the file is stored, right? So the full path of the file is really a key, and the bucket itself is a name. We'll see an example as time goes on, right? So basically, object data, what you can store up to 5 terabytes. So a file in S3 can be as big as five terabytes. You can also have like metadata, right, around your. This is more or less like there is some that S3 gives you, but there are some you can define that more or less gives more information about your object, right? Um, like I said, max object size is obviously 5 terabytes. And if you think about 5 terabytes, you'll be wondering how do you upload, right? So in as much as if you want to upload anything that is greater than 5 GB, you just use like a multi-part upload, which means you're doing it not once, right? You're splitting it and uploading them. And then there is something you see, which is called versioning, where you can basically have different versions of the same file, right? You have file A, but they're like different versions, just so that you see the benefit as time goes on. So version ID2 is one of those key properties we'll see as we go on. So when you think about S3, you now ask yourself like, what are the security around S3? And we'll see them in practice, because I think for beginners, this is one thing that is it's not so easy to wrap your head around, but I'm going to make it easy. So if you think about S3 as a bucket and you have keys inside, which are the files, for example, right? The question is, how do people access those files? How will they access it? And here I've listed the security around it. So first of all, there's really identity-based policies, and we've seen some of it already. It's just that we've not seen it around S3. So in this call, I'll be showing you specifically around S3, right? And there's also resource-based policy, and I will show you where that is also important. And there's the concept of ACL, right? Access control list. Although AWS is discouraging people from using ACL, so we'll pay less attention to it. Okay. And then there's also the block public access, but sometimes that concept can also be confusing, and I will try to clarify it for you. And then there's encryption at rest. You're talking about file, right? So it means when you store the file in S3, there's what they call you can do encryption in transit, meaning if it's moving, like as you are pushing the file to S3, it is encrypted in route, and that's basically in transit, right? Transit is like movement, so it supports it supports encryption when you're trying to push the file to S3, and then when the file is already in S3, it also encrypts. It also supports encryption when the file is resting, meaning at rest. Okay. So when you now think about it, what is identity-based policies for S3, right? We've seen this already. So think about most times when we create a user, we create a role, and we give it specific permission to a particular thing, right? It's the same for S3. So for example, and this is very, very important for inside your account, right? So you have an account, and then you have like users or groups or roles, and you want to give them access to files in a particular S3 bucket. That's where identity-based policies become very important, right? And we know what it is already, right? Things like allowing or things like denying. We've seen the policy before, it's the same. But this one, we're basically targeting it to an S3 bucket. So you can see the example that I have there. We're saying we're allowing this person, whoever that entity is, whether it's a user, it's a group, or a role, we're allowing them to get object from a particular bucket, and we're specifying the object that we want them to access, right? And there's also like a policy beneath there that says I want to be able to list buckets, right? So list the items in the bucket. So um, that's just at the basic level, but you can go further. You can say you can do wildcard, you can do conditions to say if the person's IP address matches this one, then that's when I only allow the person to see the bucket or the files in it, right? So, and as I did right there, the principle of least privilege is way should be more applicable here because it's files, bucket, right? You don't want people who should not have access to get access to your files, right? So it means that um, there is room for you to really fine tune the policies and make sure that the files that are there, people can just get access to them, right? And we'll see these examples. I'll show you. So, and then there's like a resource-based policy. Resource-based policy is something you should get used to because you're going to see it across resources. So the word resource-based policy just means that the policy itself is attached to the resource, right? So because the way S3, most of the resources in AWS work, some supports resource-based policy, which means that instead of you defining the policy on the IAM entity, you're putting it on the resource. So I can have a policy that is on the bucket itself and deciding who can see the bucket or who can see the files in them, okay? And it's not just S3 that has that functionality. As we go on, you see SQS, for example, has you can have like an SQS resource policy, okay? So S3 is one of those resource in AWS that can use the resource policy, and it is called the bucket policy, meaning instead of specifying the access on the IAM identity, you're putting it on the resource itself. That's just what it means. A resource policy is basically you're putting the resource, the permissions on the resource itself, in this case, the bucket, right? And we'll see it. It becomes clearer with an example. So this is really, really key if you want to do like cross, and that's why you see I wrote it in red, because sometimes when you go for the exam, that's what you should look out for. Whenever there's like a cross account access. So remember, you have an account, I have my own account. If I have a bucket and I need you to be able to see that bucket, only a bucket policy can allow that, because you can't just specify in your account and say, oh, I need my role to be able to see someone's bucket, right, in a different account. No, I have to give my bucket has to have a policy that allows you to see it. Okay, so that's where it becomes really. So take note of that. Cross account access is very, very important. And then you see how it also applies to like when you're trying to do like public, if you think about it, if you have like a website that has to be seen on the public, those people don't have like IAM credentials. So bucket policy becomes important in that kind of scenario also. So and you should also understand that we've seen that around policies, when there is an explicit deny, it overrides anything that is there is an allow. So even in a particular statement, if you deny something and you allow something, if you deny something and you also allow it, the deny will take precedence over the allow, right? So deny would always take precedence, okay? What is the difference so between using IAM policies and bucket policies? It's just exactly what I explained. The fact that one is IAM policies are given to IAM entities, so a user, a group, a role. We've seen all that, right? And then bucket policies are really scoped to that bucket. You create it in the bucket and it can decide who can get access to the bucket, right? And IAM policy is internal, obviously, because you expect that those people already they have like they're controlled within the AWS account, while bucket policies can be for external access, right? Whether from the internet or from a different account. And the best use case for both of them is really, one is for AWS users and the other one is for external access. If you understand this concept, you will not struggle a lot with policies, because policies are some things that people really struggle with when dealing with buckets especially. And you're going to see how we do, like how it goes as time goes on. And there is also the concept of ACLs, right? But ACLs honestly is something that is legacy right now. So AWS is trying to discourage people, trying to encourage people to move to bucket policies or IAM policies or IAM identity, right? And it's just basically access control list, right? So you can specify on the bucket or on the objects in the bucket to more or less like specify who can read, who can write, who can actually read the the ACL that is on the bucket or on the object. So yeah, it's just that's just basically. So it used to be how access was managed before bucket policy before policy became a thing, and now AWS is encouraging everyone to use bucket policies. Okay, so like I mentioned there, the recommendation is really to use bucket policies if applicable, but just know that there is also the concept of ACL. But honestly, in the exams nobody asks you about ACL again, but as we go, as we get complex, we also need to know how to create ACLs and how to use them. But just know that there is also room for you to be able to specify in the bucket, like give it a fine-grained access control list to say who can access my bucket or who cannot. So there's read, write, read ACP, write ACP, and then you can also give someone full control over a bucket or like an object, right? And then you can also disable it. It can be disabled, right? So if you set the object ownership already, it automatically just disables ACL in an account. And you see when we're creating a bucket, you see it like once you say once you enforce the owner, right? You are disabling bucket the ACL already, and we'll see it. So not much attention to ACL. And then there's also the concept of S3 block public access settings that is out there. A lot of people confuse this one, but with the practical, when we practicalize it, you see exactly how it works. And it's just the fact that sometimes you can have permissions in. You remember we talked about, like, you remember I just mentioned that in an account you can have AWS account and have permissions based on an AWS account, but you can also have permissions based on an external account. And how bucket policy public, when you say block public access, is that when you block it, it just means that no matter how permissive your policies are within the account, someone cannot see it from the outside world. That's just what it means. So you can say allow everyone, but in as much as block public policy, block public access is there, you're protecting yourself from the outside world, just in case there was something that was really permissive, and then people can actually see your bucket. And we'll see a practical example, because sometimes it's hard to explain unless you see like a very practical example, because it's the same policy, but sometimes you are just saying, in this case, I want to basically just block public access, just in case I have a mistake in my policy that would allow everyone from the internet to see my files, right? So this can prevent you from that. So, and yeah, you can do it at an account level, and you can do it at a bucket level, right? So yeah, these details, you don't really need to care about these details. You can, I mean, if you go back to the slide, you can actually see you can see more details, right? But right now you don't really need it. Just know that it is possible for you to block access, right? Basically just block public internet access from your bucket, regardless of the policies that are there. So even if I expose it to everyone, from the outside you can't see, but with an example you'll get it correctly, and you see everything that is there in terms of like whether you want to block public ACL, or if anyone can adjust your ACL. Okay. And then before we talk about encryption, I will just take you to the console so that I can share some of the things that I just talked about, to be clear from explaining like showing you what it looks like in the UI. Okay, so I'm just going to go here and exit, and then go back here. Okay, so here this is my account. I hope it's clear for everyone. Right now there is obviously this bucket that was created for me by Elastic Beanstalk. There is really nothing in there. Let me see if I can actually let me see if I can delete this one. Yeah, I've tried deleting it before. So for now, maybe I'll come back to it. So let's try and create our first bucket. So usually it says general purpose or directory. Most times, yeah, there is need there. This has its own use case, but I won't talk about it for now. So you can see what I mentioned. It basically needs to be 3 to 63 characters. Valid characters are AZ to 09, blah blah blah. So this doesn't really matter. Just make sure it is unique across AWS, right? Not just across your account, but across AWS. So I'm going to create my first one. So I'm just going to say build with Brainyl. Okay, I think this one is going to work because I just have letters and I just have letters and hyphens, right? So copy settings from another bucket. I'm not going to do that. You see, ACL is just exactly what I was telling you about, right? So you can see disabled is recommended. That's really how you should create your buckets going forward. But you can also enable them, and as we advance on this course, you'll see, how you want to use it. Right now, this is the setting I was trying to tell you about. There's a lot of details here, but you don't really just know that, yeah, you can actually block all public access from the bucket, which is exactly what I want to do for now. Bucket versioning, we'll get to it. Right now, I will leave it disabled, okay? And then encryption, we'll talk about encryption. And then for bucket key, I'll just leave them as default. I won't talk about object lock. So that's basically it. So I gave it a name and I created it, right? So I'm just going to create my bucket. So once I have created my bucket, right? So there's build with Brainyl, right? And I block public access from the bucket. One thing you should understand is that, like I mentioned, it's a bucket and objects. And objects, no matter how nested they are called keys, right? So if you saw the diagram where I showed you, one very nested object is just a key. So the path to that object is what is called the key. So right now my bucket is empty, right? So the first thing I need to do is basically I want to upload something. So it says here you can create a folder, okay? But folder, honestly, in the concept of S3, is just a path. Okay, it's just how you, yeah. S3 also has that concept of like trying to organize. You can't organize your files in S3, so you can create a folder that says month or year, and all that. But everything at the end of the day becomes, there is a unique key that comes out of it. So object key, okay, and we'll see. So I can upload my files, right? So I think I have some files. So I'm just going to add a folder. So I have this. So I also created a repo where I'm going to share these files, the files that I'm uploading now. I'm going to share it. So I have a project CCP. Here I said I want to upload a folder. Okay. So, but you can also upload just a file, a single file. In this case, I'm just going to upload a folder actually. So S3. Yes. Oh no, maybe I'll just go the file route so that I can actually show you something. I'm just going to upload this one. I'm just going to upload 1, 2, 3 files. So it says I'm uploading these 3 files, right? So permission is here. I already have all that defined. Properties, we'll get to see what this means, right? But it shows that in the property I can actually set the storage class. I think if I don't set, obviously standard, right? That's like the default storage class. So I'm just going to take it. I'm not specifying any encryption key. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to upload the files. So you can see my files have been uploaded, right, to S3. So I can go back to my bucket and see S3. These are the files that I did upload. Now, if I look at this file actually right now, you can tell you the size, in kilobyte or in bytes, whatever it is. Okay. Now the question is that right now, who can see these files right now as it stands? Because one thing you should know is that if there is no permission that gives you access to the file, you can't see the file. So let's go back to talk about the first kind of identity, that we talked about, which is IAM identity, right? So right now this file is here and there's a bucket, but I actually want someone else to be able to see these files that I just uploaded, right? So what I can do basically is to test. But now if I go to IAM, I have users in there, but some of them are just advanced users. They're basically advanced. Maybe, yeah, they have to, okay, maybe I think it would be good to, I don't know if this test user has the right permission, but let's see. Let's actually create a user because I think it will explain the concept very well so that you understand. So I'll call the person S3 user, and I'm going to give them actually programmatic access to, so give them console access. I want to create an IAM user is what I want to do. Custom, I'm just going to create a password, okay? So I don't need the person to change the password on the next sign in, so I'm just going to do next. Right now, I don't need to add the person to any group. So it means I'm creating user. I didn't give them any permission, right? So I'm just going to create a user, okay? So there is this sign in URL, right? So what it means is that, let me see if I can actually open an incognito window, okay? So incognito window, and then paste that URL, which is more or less like a way for you to sign into my account easily. So it already has this, so I'm just going to call it S3 user. And then I'm going to put the account, right, that I just did. So sign in, let's see. Okay, I'm in. So I did create a simple user, right? So let me see. Yeah, there'll be a lot of errors because the person obviously cannot access cloud. Let me see. There will be a lot of some errors. Let's see. The person can actually close, unable to create environment. Let me see. No, I won't be able to do this also. Okay, so I'll go back to my account. For now, I'm just going to give, yeah, return to list, continue. Okay, so I'm here, S3, right? So let me just give this user because I don't want to test. Let me just add inline permission to the person for now. And I'm just going to do, no, let me add the, what do you call it? Add permissions, right? Let me say attach permissions directly. I'm just going to do Cloud Shell. So I want to give the person full access to Cloud Shell because that's where I want to test this from. So I'm going to do add permissions, right? I should have created this user before this call, but I actually want you to see the process. So I'm giving the person full access to Cloud Shell, right? And then I'm coming back to my other page. And then if I refresh this, this error should go away. So now the person has access to Cloud Shell, right? So I've given the person access to Cloud Shell. So let me try and make this a bit largest, so that you can see it very well. Confirm. Then let me zoom in a bit. Okay, so this guy has access to Cloud Shell, right? So if I do, for example, I'm here and I do AWS S3, let's say list objects, right? List object, and then I do bucket. I think it's bucket, right? So no, S3. I think I need to do S3 API. Yeah, you can also do LS, but so bucket expected one argument. Okay, so right now I need to do this. So I need to go and look for the bucket name that we used here. So let's go to S3. The bucket is here. So let's go to properties. Okay, this is from the bucket name. I'll just copy this and then I'll paste it here. Okay, so list bucket. I'm doing this. Oopsie. Trying to copy, but the wrong. I think it's build. I think I could just build with Brainyl. I think it's this one, right? So you can see. So it means that I created a bucket, but it doesn't mean anyone can see it. Okay, so I created a bucket, but it doesn't mean automatically people can see it. And that brings us to the first access pattern, which is the IAM identity. Remember that whoever is here, which is S3 user, as you can see up here. I think I need to move my screen a bit so that you can see it. But one thing you notice is that the S3 user that I created at the beginning is the one in Cloud Shell trying to access the bucket. But I created the bucket does not mean anyone can just access it. So I have to give the S3 user permission to see that bucket. So, and that's one way of managing the identity, like I mentioned. So I have to go back to that user. I'm here managing the user. So I'm just going to go back to my users, S3 user, and then there is where I will add permission to the user, right? So maybe I can say just attach and look for something that is around S3, right? So S3. So I can give the person maybe S3 full access, right? Just full access to S3. S3. So I'll just do this, just to keep things simple, right? And once I do next, so I'm attaching, I'm trying to do next. Okay, add permissions, and now I've given the person access to S3, full access, right? So when I go back here and I do what I was doing before, right? So I'm listing. Now it's working. So it means that when I created the bucket, it doesn't mean anyone can see because the bucket is there. But now I created a user. I had to explicitly give the person permission to view the bucket. In this case, I think I just give him S3 full access so he can see the bucket. He can see everything that is there. And you can see what is listing, right? It shows that there's an error.html page there, index.html page there, just like we uploaded, right? And then there's a machine learning associate.png file that is there, right? Good. So that's one way of giving access. So you can either give an entity, an IAM entity, permission to see files in the bucket, which we have done. Okay, so let's go back. Let's exit this, right? And I'm just going to clear my page here, and then I'm going to go back. Let's try the second one. So here we give the person full access, right? What if we basically remove this permission? So remove, right? So we've removed the permission from the user. Let's go back and try the command again that we did. So obviously we're back to square one, right? Now the user does not have permission again. So let's try the other route. So the other route, like I mentioned, is if you're not giving them IAM permissions, you can't be giving them permissions from the bucket policy. So let's go and try the bucket policy. So we have a bucket here, right? There is a bucket here, and there is like a room for permissions, right? So permissions here is that we can say we want to edit this, right? And we can say we want to add basically a statement. And here, basically, I can say allow users access, right? So I'm just going to do this. Now for the effect is allow, right? The principal is where I can be specific. I can go here and be like, I want to give somebody, I think I need to fix my, I don't know why it switches. Okay. So in fact, maybe I can just do principal all, right? Or no, I just want to limit this down to somebody who is an AWS principal. So, but don't worry, you'll see. What it means is that I'm just trying to say, I don't know why. So in the case of principal, let me look for this guy. Who is this guy? This guy, I know his ARN. So I'm just going to paste it here and say this person effect allow. What are the actions in this case? I want to say S3 dash star. Okay. So I'm allowing that person S3 that star, and then I'm going to give them like a resource. So in this case, I have to specify like a resource. Okay. I think you can do this from the left hand side, right? If yes, and then I just need to do maybe make this a list, right? So do this. You can also create this easily from the other side, but I'm just choosing to go. What's the resource? I need to look for the S3 bucket. So in this case, let me go back here. Just look for. Let me look for. So I'm saying S3 slash, right? So I'm just going to copy this, the ARN, and paste it here. This, and then I'm also going to do this and do // honestly, don't worry about these that I created. You can also do this just by using this, whatever is on the right. Okay, I think I showed you that before. This is me just trying it on like this, so I can do that and save changes. So if I go back to what I've done, I said I'm allowing this person, right, access to do everything around the S3, right, for this particular resource, and I'm putting it as a resource policy inside of the bucket. Let's see if that changes anything. So if I go back to here, I'll just clear this page again, and then I'll do this. You can see the files are being loaded, right? Because now, although there is no policy, there is no permission given to the user, right? But there is a permission on the bucket that allows the user to come in. And now the user can still see the bucket again. So those are the two ways. It's either the user or the role or the group has permission to see the bucket, or inside of the bucket, there is a policy that allows an entity to see it, okay? Those are the two policies you need to take note of. But again, I mentioned that if it's another account, someone in another account that needs to see my bucket, then giving them a user IAM identity will not work. In that case, the only thing that can work is a bucket policy. Okay, cool. So this user can still see, even if within his own role or his own user, there is no permission that gives him access to do that. So because we created this, cool. Now the thing is, let's now talk about public access. Okay, but I think public access will actually make sense if we start talking about hosting public website. I think that's where it will become clear. Okay, but let's go back to the objects that we created right now. So if you look at this object and I click on this object, one thing you see is that if I open this object yeah, I think I need to open one that makes that makes it fun. Okay, I'll click on machine learning, right, engineer, and then I'm opening it. Right, this is my last certification that I got. So it's an image here. You can see it's loading, right? It's loading. But if you see the URL, it's a very long URL, right? Because this URL was generated with my credential, and that's why I can see the file, right? But if I go here, for example, and I say, this is actually the object URL, and I click this one, it's not going to work, right? This is not going to work because this is basically I'm directly trying to view the file, so it's not going to work. But this is going to work because this one has my credential embedded with it, and that's why I can see it here. Okay, but this one I can't see this one, and that's where public access becomes a thing, because here it's just like this is on the internet, anyone can see this, but this has my credential inside of it because it's like my IAM credential. So the only way I can allow this to work is for me to allow public access, right? So what it means is that I can actually go back to um, my bucket, for example. Remember, for me to allow public access, there's no way I can do it from just giving the person IAM permission, right? Only a bucket policy can do that when you are trying to give somebody public access or access from another account. And for that reason, I'll have to go to my properties. I'll go back to my policy that I'll go to permissions, right? So I'm going to go back to the file that I created. So this was giving a specific user permission, right? So what happens if I um, basically edit this? I want this page to work, right? What if this happens, right? And I say I'm not blocking public access again. I want to give everyone on the internet access to view the file, and I save the changes and I do confirm. It's warning me because yeah, it believes, and I'll confirm, right? Good. Now the thing is that here I've unblocked public access. The question is, if I go and load this page, will it still show? It's not going to show, because giving public exposing it publicly still does not mean that it's still going to be available publicly. You still have to grant access, right? Grant public access. So if I have to grant public access right now, my bucket policy only grants one person access to the bucket. So it means I have to edit this policy to allow more people, right? So maybe in addition to this, I'm just going to say allow. I'm just going to paste this. Sorry, just copy this and then paste it. So now I'm giving more people, right? I'm also allowing the internet. So allow, in this case, I'm just going to do principal is star, right? So star S3. No, in this case, I have to be careful. I'll just do get object. So because I just want get object, okay? And then I'm just going to do this and allow this, right? So let's see if I save this policy, what's going to happen? Is it warning me? Okay, yes. So allow users from, let me correct this to be from internet. Let me just use this, okay? And then maybe it's going to allow me to save it. Good. So now I'm doing get object from the internet. I'm also allowing that former user that I did, right? So let me now refresh this. Yeah, it's working now. So you can see this URL is now working, right? Because I have now given access from the internet to see. So if you go and think about it, here I'm saying everyone, allow everyone, right? Here I'm saying allow someone from inside of AWS. But here I'm saying allow everyone to get objects inside this my bucket, right? And that's why this page is going to load. This one, take note of it, this URL. But the thing is that what if I have this policy already enabled, right? Mistakenly, someone just enabled this policy, maybe as part of my GitHub, like maybe infrastructure as code, something happened, right? A way I can prevent myself from this is actually why AWS added these settings, this particular one. So what it means is that I can actually go here, although this setting is permitting everyone from the internet, right? Because this principal is saying everyone, it's not specifying that the person is in AWS. The thing is that I can actually now go here and block internet access. So I can go back here and block it, save, and then I'm going to do confirm, right? Now, what it means is that if I go back to this policy, although I have the internet granted access, but because I have the setting that blocks internet access, like block access from everybody, this file is not going to load again. It's now because your policy might be wrong, right? That block internet, block public access is another level of just helping you to make sure that although your policy is wrong, but that blocks public access basically to your file. So we've done that and it's now blocked. Cool. What else do you need to see? So one thing you also notice is that, let's go back to our objects. So as we'll see, I'm going to explain what storage classes are in AWS. But one thing you will notice is that when we created all these objects, they were automatically put into like the standard class, right? Standard class, right? But you can actually adjust an object and choose a class that you want it to be, okay? So if I go here, for example, I can actually do, let me just click on this object and see, yeah, so right now it says storage class and it says standard, right? but I can actually edit this and change the storage class. And we'll see what storage class is as time goes on. But it means that I can actually go here and say, I want to move this file from a standard class to any of these other classes. Okay. So once a file is created, you can change the storage class of the file. But remember, a file is not a bucket. So storage class does not apply on the bucket level. It applies on individual files. So you know, okay? And remember, although this directory that you see now, there could be a folder. So let's assume I created a folder so that you understand. Let's say test, let me just call it my folder, right? My folder, and do, and just leave the default, right? So if you go here now, there is like my folder, right? And in here, I can also basically upload a file. So in this case, maybe I'm just going to upload a file, add file. I'm just going to push this one again in there, for example. And then once that file is there, I'm just going to upload. For example, it's there already. Now, one thing you need to know is that although this is my bucket and in there is a folder, and if I click on the folder, there is a file. If I go to property, this is exactly what I was trying to tell you. In fact, I need to go to the exact object and I look at, so one thing you need to notice is that although it's like there is my folder and inside of there is like this file, the most important thing is that you should know that this is a complete path. The path is just made up of a bucket name, number one, and secondly, a key. So everything you see here is a key. Okay, there's nothing like my folder is a key, machine learning engineer is a key. No, everything you see here after this part is a key. So there's the concept of a key and there's a concept of a bucket name. Okay, that's also what I was trying to explain to you in the slide. So what else? I think that's basically some of the things I needed to show you at this point. So we did create a bucket, we did upload it. I did show you the different kind of access policies, right? So one that you can attach to an IAM identity for him to be able to see files in your bucket. And we got rid of that. We also added one that is like a bucket policy that also grants users access, right? And then we played around the permissions in such a way that we were able to say allow from the internet, right? But once we added this, we also needed this to be on for them to see it from the internet. But once we blocked this, no matter how permissive this was, you won't be able to still see the file. Okay. And then I showed you the storage classes for S3. So let's continue. We'll come back to this. Let's just leave it as it is for now, and then let's continue. So we've seen the concept of blocking. So we've seen what block public access means. We'll touch briefly about encryption. So encryption in AWS is when I was uploading that files, right? I did do it like just from the console, but ideally most people do it from API. Remember, we said S3, you access S3 via APIs. So if I wanted to upload those same file, I would have called an API, right? Called an S3 API and upload, right? So there's room for you to enable encryption in transit, meaning when I'm uploading that file, I want it to go over HTTPS, meaning the traffic should be encrypted. That's one option. But there is also encryption at rest, right? And that's where you now think about server-side encryption versus client-side encryption. Client-side is very simple, and you can't miss it anywhere you go. It just means that the customer is taking responsibility of encrypting the file. So I can just encrypt the file myself and then push to S3. Okay, that's client-side encryption. But server-side encryption means the file is encrypted in S3, and there are three different ways of doing it when the file is there. You choose how you want to go. So there's SSE, server-side. Whenever you say SSE, it's just server-side encryption. S3, meaning you can just use the native S3 encryption to do it. You can also use SSE, server-side encryption, but using a KMS key, right? So it means you are providing a key that you own, right? And there are reasons why you want to do that, but for now, you don't need to care much about it. And then there is server-side encryption using your own customer-provided key. Okay, so those are the three. But for now, just understand that there's really client-side encryption and there's also server-side encryption. So if I go to the next page, what does it look like? Client-side just means that the user will take a file, encrypt it, upload it to S3. That's basically client-side. But server-side means that the person uploads the file as is to S3, and when it is in S3, the user has already configured the bucket to choose what is used to encrypt it when the file gets to S3. So in this case, you see I mentioned server-side encryption using S3 or using KMS or customer managed key. Okay. So those are the encryption options you'll see, and as time goes on, we see them in details. But just so you know, at this level, that there's really the files that you have there, you can choose for them to be encrypted inside of the S3 bucket, so that if anyone has access to the file, it's in the encrypted form. Okay, good. So this brings me to a very important concept of S3, which is static website hosting. Okay, what it means is that I know before now we've seen how we've seen how we did with EC2, how we just exposed a website. You know, we've seen how we did it easily with I think it's Lightsail we used, right? We also saw how we just did it with elastic load balancing. But honestly, when it comes to static files, S3 is still the king. So when it comes to like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, S3 does it very well for you. So that's one way you can actually host your static site on S3, right? You specify, how does it work? You basically specify an index.html page, error.html page, and then make it public, right? Because you need people from the internet to be able to see it. And then it's HTTP only, but you can basically include HTTPS if you wanted to take it one level further. So we're going to show this now. So let's go back to our file. And I think that's also related to the exact file that I uploaded. So if I go back to my object, for example, you see that build with Brainyl has that error.html file, like I mentioned in the slide. There's also an index.html file. If I look at this file right now and I try to open it, I don't know if it's going to open like this. Let me see. Right now, I don't think you see the you're not really seeing the source, right? You're seeing the the way it's opening. But if I see, let me say view page source, I think this used to be, is this not Chrome? I actually wanted you to see the view page source, but let me even go to GitHub so that you see me on this I think CCP. I opened it just not long ago. So here, build with Brainyl. This is now on GitHub, so I'll share the link with you guys. You can see the exercise file if you wanted, and you can create yours too. So what I actually did is there's this error.html file, index.html file, machine learning engineer associate file that I uploaded here. But let's look at the index.html file. It's a simple file, right? So this is basically it. Whatever is inside is just this is the content. So what I did here was to upload it. So that's the content you see here, right? Now the thing is that this is a bucket. This is a bucket, so it needs to have error.html file, index.html file, whatever it is. In our own case here, it's a file that is making reference to a particular image, and the image is also there. Now I can actually go here and say I want to enable static website, static hosting for this bucket, right? So I'll just go to properties and I'll scroll down to the end, and there is room for static website hosting here. Okay, so what it means is that we recommend using AWS Amplify. AWS Amplify is something we're going to see at some point. AWS has so many options of doing things, okay? So recommended AWS Amplify, but there is a reason why this is also here if you want to go this approach. So if I do this edit, so I'm trying to enable static website hosting, right? So here, host a static website, index.html file is really what it's going to be. So, and HTML, so that's it, error.html is what it's going to be. I don't have any redirection rule here. I'm just going to save the changes, right? I'm just going to save changes. Now, if I go back to my settings, let's see here, it has a website. This is now here. So it means that I should be able to click this. But right now, it's still telling me access denied, right? And you know why this is happening, right? Because this URL now is available on the internet. But the only way you can see this is if I give you access. And that's where bucket policies come in. So I have to go back to my bucket and see what are the properties in this case. So go back to my properties, permissions. I'm just going to go to permissions here. And then I'm just going to look at this permission that is here. I know it did grant, there's actually room to grant public access. But the problem is that although there is a policy here, I've also blocked it here, right? So I'm just going to go back here and then edit it and then allow, so I'm not blocking public access again. So I'm going to save changes, right? So I'm just going to confirm this. And once I confirm, let's see what happens. So I'll confirm this. And now if I go back to this and I refresh, yeah, my website has loaded, right? So if you, let me see, I hope you're seeing it. Okay, so now my website has loaded. So it says, hi, my name is Brainyl. I'm an 11x certified DevOps engineer. Below is my latest certification, right? So it's just this. But what happens if I go here and I try to do blah blah blah, or no slash, slash blah blah blah, right? Yeah, you see, this is an oops page. It's an oops page that has what do you call it? It's an oops page, and basically that's given to you from the error page. So let's go back to our file. So if I go here, there's like an error.html file that is here, right? So this error.html file is actually what is dictating what is being shown here. So you can see with just small configuration, we already have a public website hosted. So if you see the page you're looking for doesn't exist, and that's because, yeah, that's exactly what we wrote here. The page doesn't exist. Go back to the home page. So if we do, I think, no, we don't need to be opening this again. So if I go back here and I do go back to the home page, it brings us here. So just know there is room for static hosting inside of S3, inside of S3 bucket, right? So I think I showed that, and now I can basically go back to the slide because I also want to show you one more thing. So I'm just going to show you one more thing before, I think, yeah, I'm going to show you one more thing. So now that we've already talked about static website hosting, that also brings us a very good concept in S3, which is versioning. And versioning is just like, versioning, that's the name, meaning you can keep different versions of the same file. That's what versioning means, right? So default state, there is no versioning, right? But once you enable it, you can keep multiple versions for the same object. Remember, files, whether it's image, whether it's PDF, in the concept of S3, it is called an object, right? So, and the reason is because, yeah, if you have multiple people working on your bucket, maybe you want to preserve file, you don't want them to be deleted and you can't get them back. Versions just helps you keep multiple versions, and then you can go back to the previous version if you wanted, right? So how will that work in S3? So let's go back to where we're coming from. So if we go here, right now, if I go to my bucket, right? So this it's here, this one, right? If I go to the properties, for example, you see bucket versioning is not enabled right now. It's really not enabled. So multiple variants of an object in the same bucket, meaning the buckets are there, the objects are there, but you can keep multiple versions. So I can go here and edit and be like, I want to enable. So one thing you should take note of is that um, for the files that you've already uploaded, remember I uploaded some files, there were no versions, right? So the versioning will kickstart once I enable it. So those will still be null at this point. So if I enable it, so let's also go back to how the files are here, just so that you know. So if I click on the bucket here, for example, it's loading. There's basically no room for me to show versions now because I've not enabled it. But let me enable it now. So just go enable and I'll save changes, right? So now I've enabled versioning. So what that means is that if I refresh this page here, what you now see is that there is now a new option that shows here, which says show versions, right? So if I do show versions, you see all of them, they are null version ID. They don't have a version ID because when I created them, there was no versioning in the bucket. So versioning will start now, okay? So what is versioning? Versioning is just the same file, but a different version. So what that means is that if I go here already in your file, everything is here. I'm going to share this. This is obviously public GitHub repo, right? So if I go to V1, and I think this is also in my file. If I go back to my bucket, right, and in this same place, and I say I want to upload the file. Remember, I already have an index.html file, right? What if I add a new file? And in this case, I do V1, but it's also index.html, right? So it's the same file, nothing has changed. Index.html file, and I'm uploading it to the same bucket. So I'm just going to do upload. Now it has uploaded. Now let's go back to the bucket. Now, one thing you will notice is that there is now an you will be wondering, I just uploaded a new file. Where is it? It's still here. It's still here. It's just now versioned, right? So if I do this, show versions, you see that there is this one, which is the first one, and there is this one, which is the second one. This is the one that has the current version name. Sorry, the current version ID. What if I go back to my page and I upload and I refresh this, right? So one thing you'll notice is that below is my latest certification. There's a V1 here. Let me zoom this a bit so I can see. Let me just take it back. So you see there's a V1. It just shows you there is a new version. That's what it means, because we did upload a new version. And if I actually go to V1, you see that that file actually has a V1 attached to it here. So that's what it's doing. And if I go back here, for example, and I also upload a new one again, upload a new file, and this time I'm uploading a V2. So I'm just going to go back to my folder, upload a V2, just upload the file, and then it succeeded, right? So it has succeeded. I'm just going to refresh my page. What's going to happen? This has changed to V2, right? The same file, but different versions. And it can really help you to save yourself in case something went wrong and somebody deleted your files, or someone just mistakenly deleted the file. There's always like a previous version kept there, okay? So the thing is that now I have these files, right? So if I show versions, it shows that this particular index.html has like 3, you can see, and this is the most recent version. So I can actually go in here and delete the version that I just created. So let's say I deleted this one. One thing you notice is that when you delete a version, it is permanently gone, like a particular version. So I'm just going to paste this here. I think I didn't paste that correctly. Let me just delete this. I'm just going to delete. So I've deleted V2. What do you think the page is going to look like? The page is going to revert to V1, right? Yeah, V1 is going to revert to V1 because that's the version before V2 was uploaded. And similarly, if I delete another version, it's just going to also play back. It's just go. So it's a way to keep multiple versions just to protect yourself from accidental delete or if something goes wrong, right? And then you're going to see it also that sometimes you want to do replication, you need versioning to be enabled before replication can happen. But if I go back to my object, for example, and if I show versions here, so again, something I also wanted to show you is that let's assume that I don't delete a version, right? And now I just want to delete the file. What do you think is going to happen? So I'm going to delete the file. And I'm saying, but one thing you notice is that it's telling me to delete. It's not saying permanently delete, because if you delete the file and not a version, it's not a permanent delete. So if I do delete here and I delete the file, it's deleted. But one thing you notice is that, so if I go back to my page, yeah, you won't see that page again. It's been deleted, but it's not completely deleted because there's versioning in place. So if I go here, although you are not seeing the file, but if I show versions, that file was just moved to a delete marker was added to the file, meaning the file is still there, but it's not public. You can't see it again. And for that reason, I can basically just go back. If I wanted to see the file again, remember here it's still showing page not found. But if I wanted to see the file again, I can actually just go and delete the delete marker. Okay, this is a bit, but once you get used to it, you understand. Once I delete the delete marker, it's like I'm restoring the file again. So if I go back here and I do delete, and I just do permanently delete, like I just paste this because I'm deleting the delete marker, and I'm do this, It's done. If I refresh this again, my page is back. And I'm still on V1, right? And I also can undo V1 and go to like the LS version. So that's basically versioning. There is more we'll see with versioning as time goes on, but that's just it in a nutshell. And while we're here, I basically will have to go back to my permission, best practice. I need to disable this. So block all public access while you're on this call, because I'm doing this live. So it means that now if you go back to this page, this is the last time. It's not going to load again after this one. So it's gone. Okay. So that's a good way for us to introduce S3. Right now I didn't really talk about I didn't talk about storage classes, and the video is already getting long. So I'm going to pause it here.